I believed in us. We were high school sweethearts, and our love story was the kind people dream of. 9 years of what I believed to be marital bliss shattered in an instant. It was a video message sent from an anonymous number that ripped my world apart. The video showed my wife at a bachelorette party, a night she told me was just about harmless fun with her friends. It turned out to be far from that. In the grainy footage, I saw her with a man, their actions clear and heart-wrenching. A tidal wave of betrayal washed over me. My heartbeat sounded loud in my ears. The video ended, but the image kept playing over and over in my mind. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, was leading a life I knew nothing about. I felt a strange combination of anger, heartbreak, and a gnawing sense of confusion. How did we get here? Was our love not real? I felt as though I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath me. I knew then I couldn't let this slide. The love I had for her, the memories we made, they demanded truth. I needed to know the extent of her infidelity. So, with a heavy heart and a need for answers, I decided to hire a private investigator. It was a step I never thought I'd have to take, but here I was faced with the unthinkable. This was just the beginning of the unraveling. The day after the video arrived, I woke up with a purpose. The dull ache in my chest hadn't subsided, but there was a newfound determination in me. The decision to hire a private investigator was not taken lightly. It felt like admitting that my marriage was beyond saving, yet I needed answers, a full understanding of the depth of my wife's betrayal. I spent the morning researching, sifting through local private investigation firms. I sought an experienced professional, someone who could discreetly uncover the truth. I finally settled on a firm with a stellar reputation for handling delicate domestic cases. I made the call, and within minutes, I was pouring out my story to a stranger. The voice on the other end was calm, reassuring, and professional, promising to handle the case with the utmost discretion. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I had taken a step towards the truth, dread because of what that truth might reveal. I looked around our home, the home I thought was filled with love and trust. It felt different now, tainted by the bitter sting of betrayal. The private investigator would start work the next day. I braced myself for what was to come. And as I did, I realized that this was more than just about uncovering my wife's secrets. It was about me taking control, reclaiming my life from the devastation that had been thrust upon me. The path to truth was set, and there was no turning back. In the days that followed, the private investigator began his work in earnest. The first set of reports came in just a week after the investigation began. As I read through them, my heart sank. My wife had not just cheated at the bachelorette party. She had been leading a double life for the past 2 years, meeting multiple men at hidden corners of our city, leaving a trail of deceit that now lay bare before me. Photographs, text messages, and even audio recordings, the evidence was overwhelming. I felt a cold anger welling up inside me as the woman I thought I knew became a stranger in front of my eyes. Her laughter echoed in our home, a haunting reminder of the duplicity that had been living with me. Each revelation brought with it a fresh wave of pain, but it also brought clarity. The late-night phone calls, she said, were from work. The weekend trips with her girlfriends, the times when she seemed distant, it all started to make sense. As I sifted through the evidence, I felt a strange sense of vindication. My suspicions were confirmed, and while the truth was agonizing, it was better than the torment of uncertainty. The investigation had provided me with a solid ground to stand on, a foundation upon which I could start rebuilding my life. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of my journey towards reclaiming my life. With the bitter truth laid bare, I knew I needed to protect myself, and that meant securing my finances. The thought of my wife, The woman who had betrayed me, having access to my hard-earned money was repulsive. I spent the next day meeting with my bank, opening 2 new accounts in my name alone. It was an arduous process filled with endless paperwork, but every signature felt like a step towards my independence. Next, I removed my wife from my life insurance policy. It felt surreal, erasing her name from a document that at once signified our mutual trust and commitment. I knew this was just the beginning of the long, bureaucratic journey of disentangling our lives, but it was a necessary step. Finally, I closed our joint credit card accounts. These cards, once symbols of our shared life and dreams, had become reminders of our shattered trust. I cut them up, each snip of the scissors echoing the finality of my decision. Throughout the day, I was fueled by a sense of urgency, a drive to take control of my life again. I was determined not to be a victim, but to be the architect of my own future. And while the emotional wounds were still raw, these practical steps gave me a sense of empowerment. I was not just reacting to my wife's betrayal, but proactively protecting myself. It was a small victory in a sea of turmoil, but it was my victory. And for now, that was enough. With my financial house in order, the next step was clear. I needed to seek legal counsel. It was time to make this separation official, to start the process of legally detaching myself from the woman who had broken our vows. I contacted a local attorney, renowned for his expertise in handling complex divorce cases. I laid out the evidence before him, the pile of photographs, text messages, and audio clips, each one a dagger in my heart. He listened attentively, his face a mask of professional empathy. When I was done, he assured me that the evidence was substantial and that it would significantly influence the proceedings in my favor. We discussed the various aspects of the divorce, the division of assets, the fate of our house, and even the possibility of alimony. As I listened to him talk about the legal implications of my wife's infidelity, I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was as though we were discussing a business transaction, not the end of a relationship that at once meant the world to me. As I left his office, I felt an odd sense of relief. I had taken another major step in reclaiming control over my life. I was no longer just a man who had been cheated on. I was the man who was taking charge, making decisions, and protecting my interests. It was a small consolation, but at that moment, it was enough to keep me moving forward. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the need to confront my wife grew stronger. With the knowledge of her betrayal and my lawyer's counsel, I decided it was time. I felt a strange calm wash over me as I prepared to face the woman who had once been the center of my world. One evening, as she returned home, I asked her to sit down. There was a brief flicker of confusion in her eyes, quickly replaced by a mask of indifference. I wondered how many times she had worn that mask while lying to me. I confronted her about her infidelity, laying bare the evidence I had gathered. I watched as her face turned from surprise to shock and then finally to guilt. But there was something else too, a hint of defiance that made my blood boil. I demanded that she leave our home. I wanted to erase her presence, to cleanse our shared space of the deceit that had tainted it. Her refusal to leave, however, was a punch to my gut. Her insistence on staying, even after everything she had done, was a slap in the face. Our home, once a sanctuary filled with love and laughter, had become a battlefield. The tension was palpable as we circled around each other. The silence between us heavy with unspoken words and pent-up emotions. Yet, amidst the chaos and pain, I found a shred of comfort in the confrontation. I had stood up for myself, faced the woman who had betrayed me, and demanded the respect I deserved. It was a small victory, but it was mine. And in that moment, it gave me the strength to keep fighting. My wife's refusal to leave the house was a harsh blow. It felt as if she was mocking me, insisting on her presence in a home that no longer felt like ours. Despite the confrontation and the evidence of her infidelity, she seemed determined to hold her ground. In my frustration, I sought advice from my lawyer. The news was less than favorable. Despite the house being mine, I couldn't legally force her to leave the marital home until after the divorce was finalized. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The walls of our house, once filled with love, now felt like a prison. Living under the same roof with her was unbearable. Each shared glance was a reminder of her betrayal. Each encounter a test of my patience. I felt a growing resentment towards her, an emotion that was new and unwelcome. However, I couldn't let her refusal to leave break me. I was already in the process of reclaiming my life, and I wasn't about to let her defiance stop me. I retreated into myself, choosing to focus on my well-being and the legal proceedings at hand. The house was no longer a home, but a battleground where we coexisted in uncomfortable silence. Yet, in the midst of this tense standoff, I held my ground. I knew that this was just a temporary obstacle, a storm that I had to weather before I could finally move on. And so, I braced myself for the challenging days ahead, determined to stand my ground. With each passing day, the tension within the house grew. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional forced conversations necessary for cohabitation. The standoff had turned into a waiting game, each of us anticipating the final verdict that would set us free from this toxic environment. In the midst of this strained silence, I continued to focus on the divorce proceedings. The paperwork seemed endless, each document a cold reminder of our crumbling marriage. Yet, there was a grim satisfaction in each completed form, each signed affidavit, small steps toward my newfound freedom. In the midst of this turmoil, I found pleasure in simple routines, like cooking my meals, going for a run, or even reading a book in the quiet corner of our house provided much-needed distractions from the harsh reality. Despite the strained atmosphere, I found myself growing stronger. I was no longer the same man who had discovered his wife's betrayal. I was evolving, becoming more resilient, more determined. With every passing day, I was less the victim and more the survivor. My wife's presence was a constant reminder of her infidelity, yet it also served as a catalyst, pushing me to fast-track the divorce proceedings. I was eager to reclaim my space, to banish the ghost of her betrayal from my life. But for now, I had to be patient, to play the waiting game until the final verdict was delivered. The day finally arrived when the divorce proceedings officially began. The courtroom was sterile and intimidating. As I sat across from my wife, a surge of emotions washed over me. I was about to legally sever ties with the woman I had once vowed to spend my life with. The proceedings were complex and emotionally taxing. My lawyer presented the evidence of her infidelity, each piece a stark reminder of her betrayal. The court listened, the judge's face impassive as he leafed through the documents, detailing my wife's double life. My wife's lawyer attempted to defend her, spinning tales and twisting truths. It was a difficult thing to witness, yet I remained stoic, focusing on the end goal. I reminded myself that this was a necessary step towards my freedom. Despite the bitter taste of proceedings left in my mouth, I felt a sense of progress. With each passing minute, I was closer to being free from the chains of this failed marriage. The courtroom, while intimidating, was the arena where I was finally able to voice my grievances, to demand justice for the wrong done to me. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt exhausted, yet strangely exhilarated. The journey was far from over, but I had survived the first battle. I was one step closer to reclaiming my life. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope for a brighter future. As the divorce proceedings continued, the emotional toll started to weigh heavily on me. Even though I was determined to move forward, I found myself grappling with feelings of loss, betrayal, and loneliness. I would sometimes find myself wandering through the house, the echoes of the past resonating off the walls. The memories of happier times would sneak up on me, bringing with them a fresh wave of pain. The woman I had once loved, the woman I had shared my dreams with, was now a stranger. There were nights when I lay awake, plagued by a sea of unanswered questions. Why did she cheat? Where did we go wrong? Could I have done something different? These thoughts would spin around in my head, leaving me feeling lost and confused. Despite the pain, I knew I had to confront these emotions. I allowed myself to grieve, to feel the loss. It was a part of the healing process, a necessary step towards moving on. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, I found peace in unexpected places. The chance meeting with an old friend led to regular coffee catch-ups. A neglected hobby was rediscovered, providing a welcome distraction. Slowly, I started building a support system, drawing strength from these small yet significant connections. The emotional struggle was real and it was hard, but I was learning to navigate it, finding my way through the storm one day at a time. And with each passing day, I felt a little stronger, a little more resilient. I was not just surviving, I was learning to thrive. Finally, the day of the final verdict arrived. As I sat in the courtroom, heart pounding, I felt an odd mix of fear and relief. Today, the legal ties that bound me to my wife would be severed. The judge delivered the verdict with a stern, impartial expression. The evidence of my wife's infidelity coupled with my lawful conduct throughout the process influenced the decision. The house was granted to me, a significant victory in the long, arduous battle. My wife's face remained unreadable as the verdict was pronounced, her emotions hidden behind a mask of indifference. I felt a pang of resentment towards her, yet there was also a sense of closure. As I left the courtroom, the finality of the situation hit me. I was now officially divorced. The chapter of my life that had been tainted by betrayal and pain was finally closed. With the final verdict, the reality of my new status settled in. I was a divorced man at 30. The house, once filled with shared dreams and laughter, was now solely mine. It felt larger, emptier, yet it was a canvas ready for a fresh start. In the days that followed, I began the process of removing her presence from my space. I packed up her belongings, each item, a bitter reminder of our shared past. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls a new color, and even adopted a dog, a long-held dream of mine that she'd always vetoed. Yet, the quiet was sometimes too loud. The absence of her presence was a constant reminder of the void that the end of our marriage had left in my life. I found myself grappling with the loneliness that the silence brought, but I also found moments of peace in it. Despite the pain, I started to see the glimmers of a new beginning in the aftermath. It was the start of a journey where I was in control, a journey towards healing and self-discovery. And while the road seemed long and arduous, I was ready to embark on it, one step at a time. As weeks turned into months, I slowly adjusted to my new normal. The house, once a stark reminder of my failed marriage, started to feel like home again. The silence, which had initially been overwhelming, was now comforting. My daily routines evolved without her presence. I started cooking for myself, trying out recipes that I had always wanted to. I spent evenings reading in the quiet corner of the house or playing with my new dog. I started to rebuild my social life, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. I took up hobbies that I had long neglected, finding joy in activities that I had forgotten about. I also started therapy, a decision that proved instrumental in my healing process. It provided a safe space to process my emotions, to understand my feelings of betrayal and grief, and to learn how to trust again. Adjusting to the new normal was not easy. There were moments of loneliness, moments when the weight of the past threatened to pull me down. But with each passing day, the pain dulled a bit, replaced by a newfound sense of hope. I was learning to live again, to find joy in the small things and to look forward to the future. The healing process was slow and often painful, but I was committed to it. I started to understand that it wasn't the linear journey. There were days when I felt strong and optimistic, and there were days when the pain seemed unbearable, but I held on, knowing that each day was a step towards healing. Therapy was a significant part of my healing journey. It helped me unpack the layers of betrayal, resentment, and grief. It helped me understand that it was okay to feel the way I did, that healing took time. I started to learn how to forgive, not for her, but for me. I started to indulge in self-care, taking time each day to do something that made me happy, whether it was reading a book, going for a run, or simply sitting in my backyard with my dog. These moments of solitude were therapeutic. I also started journaling, a practice that proved to be incredibly cathartic. Writing about my feelings, my fears, and my hopes helped me process my emotions. It provided an outlet for the whirlwind of emotions that often threatened to consume me. Through this healing process, I realized that I was more than just a man who had been cheated on. I was a survivor, a fighter. I was someone who had faced betrayal and heartbreak, yet was still standing. And with each passing day, I was becoming stronger. The year had passed since the day I discovered my wife's betrayal. It felt like a lifetime ago. I was not the same man I was back then. I had grown, evolved, and healed. I had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. I was finally able to look back at the past without the sharp sting of betrayal. I accepted that my marriage was a part of my life that had ended, a chapter that had closed. It was a part of my journey, but it did not define me. As I sat in my house, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The walls that once echoed with deceit were now filled with hope and resilience. The rooms that once felt cold and empty were now filled with warmth and love for myself. I felt ready to move on, to open myself up to new experiences, new people. The thought of dating again was both exciting and terrifying, but I knew I was ready to take the leap. I was ready to explore this new chapter of my life. My journey had been a roller coaster of emotions filled with heartbreak and healing. But as I looked back, I realized that it was also a journey of self-discovery and growth. I had faced the worst and had come out stronger. I was ready for whatever life had in store for me. And so, with a sense of optimism and hope, I stepped into the new chapter of my life. Oh, I forgot to add, my ex-wife was thrown in jail for driving under the influence a few months after the divorce. She had lost her job, moved back in with her mom. Last I heard, she was still living at home at Third Trust. That's one thing I thought we had rock solid in our marriage. But hey, life loves a good curveball, doesn't it? It was just another Thursday, or so I thought, rummaging through drawers for my charger. Then I found her phone, buzzing with notifications, not usually a big deal, right? Except this time it was. I wish I could say I didn't snoop, but those messages, they were like a car crash you can't look away from. Texts from AP, my assistant, no less. Stuff that would make a sailor blush. My gut twisted into knots. This wasn't just some flirty office banter. It was full-blown betrayal. So, I confronted her. Laid it all out. Her face went ghost white, then red hot. Denial. Accusations. The whole 9 yards. I was paranoid, delusional. But the evidence was glaring, right there in pixels and bytes. She kept denying, though, like if she said it enough, it might come true. I wasn't going to let this slide. I needed the truth, concrete and undeniable. Enter my pie. A guy who looked like he stepped out of a noir film. He got to work, tailing, taking snaps, the whole shebang. Meanwhile, I turned our home into my personal surveillance state. Cameras hidden in the most unassuming places. It felt wrong, but what choice did I have? Days passed, a weird mix of normalcy and espionage. Then, the pie hit the jackpot. Videos. Man. Not just texts, but actual, irrefutable proof of her and AP together. Watching it felt like a punch to the gut, each frame a betrayal. That night, I sat in our living room, the evidence laid out on the coffee table like some twisted exhibit. The truth was right there, undeniable. My next move was clear, but man, was it going to be a doozy. Never thought I'd be the guy serving cold, hard truth with the appetizers. But here I was, at our meticulously planned dinner party, where I'd unveil my wife's betrayal. Our closest friends and family all gathered around, clueless about the storm brewing. I clinked my glass, signaling for silence. "I've got a surprise," I announced, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. The screen lit up, showing texts, emails, and the grand finale, video evidence of my wife's affair with my assistant. Gasps echoed around the room. I watched their faces, a mix of shock and disbelief. My wife's face was a canvas of horror and denial. "This is a misunderstanding," she stammered, but her words fell flat in the heavy air of betrayal. I didn't bask in the drama. Instead, I moved to the next act of my plan. Filing for divorce seemed like a natural step, but it was more strategic than emotional. I cited her affair as the reason, knowing it would influence the proceedings in my favor. My lawyer was a shark, and I was ready to let him loose. But the real blow was the asset freeze. I had our accounts and assets legally frozen, leaving her financially stranded. The look on her face when she realized the extent of her predicament was something I thought would bring me satisfaction. Instead, it was a hollow victory. In a desperate attempt, she pleaded for forgiveness, promising it was a mistake. "I never meant for this to happen," she cried, tears streaming down her face. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done being the understanding husband. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. As the chapter closes, I'm left with a mix of emotions. There's a sense of justice, sure, but also a profound sense of loss. I had loved her, after all, but that love was buried under layers of betrayal and deceit. The path ahead was clear, but it was a path I'd walk alone. You know, they say life's a roller coaster, but mine? It's more like a thriller movie, the kind that leaves you on the edge of your seat, heart pounding. It all started when a P, my right-hand man at work, vanished into thin air. Just like that, poof, gone. This was the guy who'd been warming my seat at home while I was out busting my chops. I should have been relieved, but his disappearance only thickened the plot. That's when the gears in my head started turning. If life wanted to play games, I was game. It was time for a little payback. A carefully orchestrated plan to teach my dear wife a lesson she wouldn't forget. The first move? A social media crusade. Nothing too dramatic, just a few well-placed posts to give people a glimpse of her true colors. The reactions were instant. A mix of shock, outrage, and for some, a bit of "I knew it." The fallout was like a line of dominoes. First, her job. She called me, tears and all, saying she got the boot. Scandal, they called it. I almost felt a pang of something. But no, this was the bed she made. Then came the cold shoulder from friends, family, the whole entourage. She was like a pariah, and I was the puppet master, pulling the strings from behind the curtain. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it, watching her world crumble piece by piece. But there was this nagging voice in the back of my head, wondering if I'd gone too far. I shook it off. This was justice, right? Payback for all the lies, the deceit. I was the victim here, taking back control. As her world shrank, mine expanded. I was in the driver's seat, steering this narrative where I wanted it to go. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was a show, a spectacle, and I was both the director and the lead actor. A part of me wondered, when the final curtain fell, what would be left of the stage we'd both played on. If someone had told me my life would turn into a twisted game of chess, I'd have laughed. But here I was, in the thick of it. It started with my wife, desperate and penniless, her accounts frozen solid by my doing. She was scrambling for pennies, a far cry from the life of luxury she was accustomed to. Watching her struggle stirred something in me, but my resolve was firm. This was her doing, her consequences to bear. Then came the eviction notice. I owned the house, and she had no legal claim to it. The notice was just a piece of paper, but it might as well have been a dagger. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of our shared life. She pleaded, cried, but I was deft at it. This was retribution, plain and simple. That life, oh, it loves its curveballs. Just when I thought I had the upper hand, a mysterious package landed on my doorstep. Inside, evidence that turned my world upside down. AP, the man I thought was just a cheating scoundrel, was actually a pawn in a larger game. He was targeting me, not just personally, but professionally, a hired gun by a rival business. It was like watching a thriller unfold, except I was the protagonist. My wife, as it turned out, was just a means to an end, a tool in their elaborate scheme to take me down. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She was used, manipulated, just as I had been. This revelation threw me into a tailspin. The anger and thirst for revenge I'd been nursing was now mixed with a strange cocktail of guilt and confusion. Had I been too harsh? Was this really justice, or just another layer of the game? As my wife fought tooth and nail against the eviction and the asset freeze, I found myself in a moral quagmire. Part of me wanted to let her drown in the mess she'd helped create, but another part, a part I'd tried to silence, wondered if I was any better than those who'd set this chain of events in motion. Her legal battles were futile, her resources a mere fraction of what she once had access to. It was a losing fight, and we both knew it, but as I watched her struggle, a new battle raged within me. A battle between the man I'd become in this saga of revenge and the man I once was, before betrayal, before vengeance, before this all-consuming game had begun. This chapter of my life, it wasn't just about settling scores anymore. It was about unearthing truths, about understanding the real enemy, and perhaps about confronting the demons within. Ever had one of those moments where everything feels like it's spinning out of control? That's where I found myself, right in the middle of my grand plan for revenge. It started off as a simple idea, a public event, the kind that would put my wife's dirty laundry out for everyone to see. I set the stage perfectly, ensuring every eye in the community would be on us. The night kicked off without a hitch. There she was, my soon-to-be ex-wife, clueless about what was about to hit her. The room was buzzing, and then I dropped the bomb. The evidence of her affair splashed across a giant screen. The gasps, the whispers, it was like music to my ears. But then, things took a turn. A couple of her diehard friends, or what she had left of them, jumped to her defense. Words were thrown, tempers flared, and before I knew it, a full-blown physical altercation erupted. It was chaos, a whirlwind of shouting and shoving, and there I was, in the eye of the storm, feeling a rush I couldn't explain. But then, the unexpected happened. In the midst of all this madness, my wife collapsed. Stress, isolation, the whole scandal, it was too much for her. You'd think that would have been a wake-up call for me, right? A moment to step back and rethink this vendetta. But no, I was too far gone. My heart had turned to stone. I watched as she was rushed to the hospital, and I felt nothing. Just when I thought things couldn't get more twisted, enter the mysterious benefactor. Out of nowhere, Someone started throwing support her way, pulling her out of the financial abyss I'd tossed her into. It was infuriating. Who was this person undermining my carefully laid plans? This chapter of our lives was like a game of chess, with moves and countermoves, but I was starting to lose track of who was playing who. There I was, thinking I was the puppet master, but with every twist and turn, I was left wondering who really had the control. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, boom, you're hit with a revelation that turns everything on its head. That's exactly what happened to me. I was deep in my quest for revenge when I decided to dig a little deeper into AP, the man who turned my life into a living soap opera. I started digging into AP's past, and let me tell you, it was like peeling back layers of an onion. Each layer revealed something more rotten than the last. Turns out, this guy was a pro at playing people, a real-life puppet master. He'd been manipulating relationships for personal gain his whole career. Knowing this added a whole new flavor to the betrayal. It wasn't just a fling, it was a calculated move. Meanwhile, my wife, in a desperate attempt to salvage whatever dignity she had left, made a public apology. It was broadcasted for all to see, a display of remorse, or so it seemed. Part of me wondered if there was any sincerity in her words, if she truly regretted the pain she caused. But by then, my heart had hardened. I couldn't see past my own hurt and anger. So, I did what any self-respecting, scorned husband would do. I rejected her apology, and not just privately. I made sure everyone knew that her words meant nothing to me. This rejection, it was like the final nail in the coffin for her. I watched, almost detached, as she spiraled further down. Her life, once so full of charm and grace, was now in ruins. The vibrant woman I once knew was no more. In her place stood a broken shadow, a reminder of the damage caused by betrayal and revenge. It's strange, being in this position. Part of me relished in her downfall, felt a sense of justice being served. But another part, a quieter, more reflective part, wondered if this was really victory. Watching her descent, I couldn't help but question what I'd become in this quest for retribution. Was I really the hero of this story? Or had I turned into something else? Something darker? Who would have thought, right? After all the chaos, the lies, the heartache, the man who started it all, my assistant, AP, just waltzes back into the picture. He shows up out of the blue, oozing charm and deceit, offering my wife a deal straight out of a spy movie. The nerve of this guy, he wanted her to betray me, to hand over sensitive company information in exchange for a fat stack of cash. As I watched from a distance, I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was cornered, desperate, her life a tattered mess because of the games we'd all been playing. I could tell part of her was considering it, weighing the option of one last betrayal for a chance to escape this nightmare. But then, something unexpected happened. She said no. After everything, after the lies, the affair, the public humiliation, she drew a line. She refused to sink further, to betray me again. It was a moment of clarity, a flicker of the woman I once knew, the one I thought I'd lost forever to greed and deception. That's when AP showed his true colors. The guy wasn't just a cheat, he was dangerous. He threatened to hurt me, to take me out of the picture if she didn't comply. The stakes were suddenly higher than any of us had anticipated. And then another twist. My wife, the woman I'd vilified, the one I'd pushed to the brink, came to me with a warning. She told me everything. AP's return, his offer, his threat. It was a surreal moment, standing there, listening to her, realizing that despite the venomous path our lives had taken, there was still a shred of concern, of care. It was a chapter straight out of a thriller, with betrayals, threats, and unexpected alliances. The lines between right and wrong, between revenge and justice, they were all blurred. Here we were, in the middle of a game that had spiraled out of control. A game where the only winning move was not to play. But the question remained, were we too far gone to back out now? Life's funny, you know. One moment you're on top of the world, the next, you're setting a trap for the guy who tried to ruin your life. That's where I found myself after my wife's bombshell warning about AP's comeback and his devious plans. I was burning with a mix of anger and a strange sense of gratitude. There she was, trying to save me from the mess she helped create. Irony at its finest, huh? So, I hatched a plan, a real cunning one. I used the info she gave me, turned the tables on AP. It was like setting up a chessboard, every piece moving exactly as I wanted. And man, did it work. AP walked right into the trap, thinking he was the hunter when he was actually the prey. The look on his face when the cops slapped those cuffs on him was priceless. All his schemes, his manipulations, they crumbled to dust right there. But here's the kicker, even with AP out of the picture, things between me and my wife were too far gone. There was no fairy tale ending, no tearful reconciliation. The betrayal, the lies, they were too deep, the wounds too raw. We were past the point of no return. And it didn't end there for her. With AP's arrest, all sorts of skeletons came tumbling out of the closet. She got tangled up in the legal mess, facing charges for her part in the whole debacle. It was a hard fall from grace, and I didn't lift a finger to break her fall. Then came the divorce settlement. Let's just say the prenup was a lifesaver. I walked away with everything, leaving her with nothing but memories and regrets. I know it sounds harsh, but hey, actions have consequences, right? The final blow? She ended up homeless. Yeah, you heard that right. From living in luxury to having nowhere to call home. Her life, once so full of promise and laughter, now a shadow of its former self. As I close this chapter, I can't help but wonder, was it worth it? The revenge, the satisfaction of seeing her life crumble, did it really make up for the betrayal? I guess some questions don't have easy answers. All I know is, life goes on, and so do I, in a world that's a little less bright, a little less kind. Life's a funny thing, you know? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws you a curveball that knocks you off your feet. That's where I found myself, in the aftermath of it all. Rebuilding my life, focusing on my business, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in the chaos that had become my existence. The community, well, they were split right down the middle. Some looked at me as a hero, a man who stood up for himself. Others, they pitied her, the woman who lost everything. You could feel the tension, the whispers, the judgments. It was like living in a fishbowl, every move scrutinized, every decision judged. Then came my wife's regret. It was like a floodgate had opened, apologies and pleas for forgiveness pouring out. But it was too late. The bridge was burned, the damage done. I couldn't find it in me to forgive, to forget. I was moving on, or at least trying to. But life, oh, it had other plans. Enter the plot twist. A long-lost friend of mine reappears out of the blue. And guess what? He was the mysterious benefactor helping my wife all this time. Talk about a stab in the back. Here I was, thinking I knew my friends, my enemies. But the lines, they were all blurred. He believed in second chances, redemption, all that jazz. But me? I felt betrayed, tricked. It was a rift that couldn't be mended, a friendship lost in the crossfire of my vendetta. And just when I thought I'd seen it all, my wife, beaten down by life, makes one final plea. Not for love, not for reconciliation, but for survival. She was at rock bottom, and even then, I couldn't bring myself to lend a hand. It was a decision that weighed on me, a reminder of the cost of revenge. This chapter of my life was a crossroads, a test of character and loyalty. What do you do when the lines between right and wrong are blurred? How do you choose between self-preservation and compassion? These were the questions that haunted me as I stood at the precipice of a new life, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. If you told me a year ago that my life would turn out like this, I would have laughed you out of the room. But here I am, staring at the ruins of everything I once held dear. It all came crashing down, starting with me slamming the door shut on my wife's final plea. There was no going back, no more chances. I was determined to close this chapter of my life, no matter the cost. My wife, left with nothing, surprised me though. She found this resilience, this will to survive despite being at rock bottom. Watching from afar, I saw her grappling with new challenges, legal battles, health issues, the whole 9 yards. It was like she was clawing her way out of a hole, determined not to let the darkness consume her. But as I sat in my tower of solitude, the winds began to shift. The community, which once had my back, started to turn. Whispers of my ruthlessness, my cold-hearted revenge, began to spread. Friends became strangers, and strangers became critics. My reputation, once my most prized possession, was now tarnished. Then, the unthinkable happened. My empire, my business, which I had sacrificed so much to protect and grow, began to crumble. It was a slow, painful process, like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. I had been so focused on my vendetta, so consumed by my need for retribution, that I had neglected the very foundation of my success. In the end, it wasn't just my wife who lost everything. I stood amidst the wreckage of my own making, realizing the heavy price of my vengeance. My once flourishing business was now a shadow of its former self, my personal life a barren wasteland of broken relationships and lost connections. As the chapter closed on this tumultuous saga, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of it all. In my quest to punish my wife, to make her pay for her betrayal, I had lost everything. My story, which began as a quest for justice, ended as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of revenge. There was no peace, no satisfaction, just the hollow emptiness of a man who had let his thirst for vengeance. The moment I saw Alex, something shifted. Standing there, with his back to the morning sun filtering through the office blinds, he was discussing strategies with the team. His confidence was unmistakable, his voice carrying a certain enthusiasm that was hard to ignore. It was just a glance, really, but it lingered longer than it should have. I shook it off, reminding myself I was a married woman, a project manager, not some love-struck teenager. By the time we had our first one-on-one meeting over coffee to discuss the project's direction, my initial intrigue had blossomed into genuine respect for his vision. Alex talked about the project with such passion, it was contagious. You really nailed the presentation last week, Maria. It's clear you've got a solid grip on where we need to head, he said, his eyes locking with mine for a moment longer than necessary. My heart raced at the compliment, a mix of professional pride and something else, something more personal. We found ourselves staying late one evening, the office quiet except for the occasional sound of our voices and the soft tapping on our keyboards. It was supposed to be a session to finalize the project plan, but it quickly turned into something else. Between the discussions of timelines and deliverables, we shared personal stories, laughing over past work blunders and bonding over our mutual love for hiking. It felt easy, comfortable, and dangerously close to crossing a line I hadn't even realized I was approaching. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Thanks for staying late today. Couldn't have gotten the plans so polished without you. It was a simple message, professional and polite, but it sparked a flurry of exchanges. Casual at first, our texts gradually veered into the personal territory, blurring boundaries with every send but impressed. Our work dinner was the tipping point. What began as a meal to discuss project details evolved into an evening filled with laughter, shared interests, and an undeniable connection. I found myself sharing things with Alex that I hadn't even shared with Tom, my husband, in months. The guilt was there, nagging at the back of my mind, but I pushed it aside, caught up in the moment and the exhilarating feeling of being understood and admired. Walking back to my car that night, the air felt different, charged with an energy I was both excited and scared to acknowledge. I knew I was standing at the precipice of something life-changing, yet the pull towards whatever this was with Alex felt too strong to resist. The rational part of me screamed warnings, but the part of me that craved excitement and connection was louder, drowning out everything else. As I drove home, the streets empty and the city lights a blur, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was hurtling towards an unknown destination at full speed. And the truth was, part of me didn't want to stop. From the moment I stepped into the light of our kitchen, the air felt charged, different. Tom was sitting at the table, a look of concern etched across his face that I hadn't seen in a long time. "You've been coming home late a lot," he started, his voice steady but laced with something that sounded like fear. "Is everything okay at work?" His question, so simple yet loaded, caught me off guard. I forced a smile, brushing off his concern with a rehearsed ease. "Yeah, just the usual project madness. You know how it is." But even as I spoke, I could feel the weight of the lies settling in. The next day, Alex handed me a book, his fingers lingering a moment too long as they brushed against mine. "Thought you'd like this," he said, a knowing look in his eyes. The book was on architectural design, a subject we'd spent hours discussing. It felt personal, a token of the connection growing between us, hidden beneath the guise of work-related enthusiasm. When Tom found the book later, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. Panic fluttered in my chest as I lied. "Oh, a colleague lent it to me. Said it was a good read." I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, but he didn't push further. That night, I lay awake, the gap between us and our bed feeling like a chasm. The tension broke on the night of our project's successful launch. Alex and I found ourselves alone, celebrating over drinks. The air was electric with our triumph and something more, something unspoken. When he leaned in to kiss me, it felt inevitable, like all the moments leading up to this had been a countdown to the inevitable collision of our lips. The thrill of it consumed me, drowning out the quiet voice of guilt whispering in the back of my mind. But the guilt was there, a shadow trailing behind the moments of exhilaration. It reared its head in the quiet moments, in the pauses between Alex's messages that had become my lifeline. I found myself hiding my phone from Tom, the lies building like a wall between us. Tom's voice broke through my fog of denial one evening as we sat across from each other, an ocean of unsaid words between us. "We're drifting apart," he said, his voice breaking. "I feel like I'm losing you." I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap with truths and confessions, but fear held me back. "We're fine, Tom. Just a rough patch, that's all," I said, my voice hollow, the reassurance as much for me as for him. With each day, the secret grew, a living thing between Alex and me, pulling us further into its gravity. And as it did, the life I had built with Tom, built on years of love and shared dreams, seemed to drift further away, leaving me caught between the thrill of the new and the comfort of the old, unsure of where I belonged anymore. I never thought a simple cup of coffee could feel like a grenade with the pin pulled out. But there we were, Alex and I, laughing over lattes in that cozy cafe corner, when the door chimed and my world tilted on its axis. Tom, my husband, the man I shared a life with, walked in. The look on his face when he saw us together, it was a mix of confusion, hurt, and something else I couldn't quite place. Maria, what's going on? His voice was calm, too calm. I scrambled for an explanation that sounded like the truth but wasn't. Oh, hey, we're just discussing the new project timeline. Grab a coffee, join us. The lie tasted bitter. The cafe encounter was just the beginning. A few days later, Tom confronted me with my phone in hand, his expression dark and stormy. Who's Alex? He asked, voice tight with barely contained anger. The screen displayed a string of texts from Alex, ones I thought I had deleted, ones that no doubt crossed lines. He's just a colleague, I stammered, trying to downplay the obvious. We're friends, that's all. But the look in Tom's eyes told me he didn't buy it, not for a second. Then came the ultimatum, a word I never thought would find its way into our marriage. It's him or me, Maria. You decide. The weight of those words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I promised to end it with Alex, to cut ties and focus on us. But promises, I learned, are as fragile as glass, easily made and easily broken. The weekend away with Alex was supposed to be a secret, a hidden chapter in a book I was writing with someone else. We masked it as a work conference, an excuse dipped in deceit. But when Tom found the hotel receipts, the lie exploded in my face. It was for a work thing, Tom. You're reading too much into this. The denial came easily, too easily, a reflex born of guilt. But Tom, ever the detective, went a step further. I discovered the GPS tracker on my car one afternoon, a silent witness to my lies. The betrayal I felt at his lack of trust was ironic, considering my own. In a moment of weakness, I confided in my friend about the affair. I don't know what to do, I admitted, the words tasting like ash. I'm so lost. Her sympathy was a balm, but her words were a knife. You need to figure it out, Maria. You're playing with fire. Each event, each lie, built a labyrinth around me, one I couldn't navigate. With every step I took, I wandered further into the maze, losing pieces of myself and my marriage along the way. The realization hit me hard, a truth I couldn't escape. I was the architect of my own downfall, crafting a story with no happy ending in sight. The words of my friend echoed in my ears, a warning I chose to ignore. Maria, this is dangerous, she had said, her voice heavy with concern. You could lose everything. But the thrill, the forbidden excitement of being with Alex, overshadowed the voice of reason. I was torn, caught in the middle of a storm I had conjured, unable to step back or move forward. It was during a seemingly innocent moment, hands entwined under the table, that our secret began to unravel. Someone from work spotted us, and by the next day, the whispers had started. The office was abuzz, the rumor mill churning out stories faster than I could deny them. I heard Maria and Alex are a thing. Isn't she married? The question stung, each one a reminder of the web of lies I was tangled in. Denying the rumors became a part of my daily routine, each denial a brick in the wall I was building around myself. It's not true, I'd say, forcing a laugh, trying to appear unfazed. But inside, the pressure was mounting, a constant, gnawing reminder of the reality I was trying to escape. The day Tom showed up at work for a surprise lunch was the day I realized how far I had drifted from the shore. His presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like an intrusion. I thought we could have lunched together, he said, smiling, unaware of the storm raging inside me. The panic was palpable, a thick cloud of fear and guilt. How could I sit across from him, knowing the lies that lay between us? Another, work, trip with Alex was the nail in the coffin, a decision made in a moment of folly. Tom's suspicion was evident in his eyes, a silent question that demanded an answer I wasn't ready to give. It's just a conference, I lied, the words tasting like ash. But the lie was thin, transparent, and we both knew it. A colleague pulled me aside one day, her words a lifeline I was too scared to grasp. "Maria, be careful," she cautioned, her eyes filled with a mix of worry and disappointment. "You're risking your career, your reputation." But her words, meant to pull me back from the edge, only pushed me further into the abyss. I was too far gone, too entangled in the lies and the longing. Home became a battlefield, a place of silent dinners and unspoken accusations. The tension was a living, breathing entity, filling the spaces between Tom and me, a constant reminder of the chasm that had formed. We were strangers, sharing a house but not a life, the distance between us growing with each passing day. Caught in a web of my own making, I was losing sight of who I was, who I had been before Alex walked into my life. The excitement had faded, leaving behind a trail of destruction, a life fractured by choices I couldn't undo. The warning signs were there, clear as day, but I had chosen to ignore them, blinded by a passion that was as fleeting as it was fierce. Now, I was paying the price, trapped in a maze of lies and regrets, searching for a way out that didn't exist. The moment I decided to leave Tom for Alex, I thought I was choosing true love over security. It felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. "I'm going to be with Alex," I whispered to my reflection, trying on the decision like a new dress, turning it over in my mind, looking for flaws. But when I told Alex, expecting him to sweep me up in a declaration of mutual passion, his hesitation sliced through the fantasy. "Maria, it's complicated. I'm not sure I can leave my situation right now," he stammered, his words a cold bucket of reality dumped over my head. The ground beneath me shifted, the future I had imagined crumbling away. The realization that I had misjudged Alex's intentions was a bitter pill to swallow. I had gambled everything on a mirage, leaving me stranded in no man's land. In desperation, I sought Tom out, hoping to find a bridge back to the life I had so recklessly abandoned. "Tom, can we talk?" "I made a mistake," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of my regret. But the distance in his eyes told me that the chasm between us might be too wide to cross. "I don't know if there's anything left to say." "Maria," he replied, his voice hollow. My discovery of the GPS tracker on my car was the spark that ignited an inferno. Confronting Tom, I demanded answers, only to be faced with the evidence of my deceit laid bare. "How could you not trust me?" I accused, even as I knew the hypocrisy of my words. The argument that followed was a tempest, raw and unyielding. I tried to justify my actions, to make him see that my mistake didn't define me. But Tom was unmoved, his heart hardened against my pleas. The isolation that followed was suffocating. At work, colleagues who once greeted me with smiles now offered only cool nods, their conversations stopping as I approached. The whispers were a constant hum in the background, a soundtrack to my downfall. Then came the ultimatum from Alex, the final nail in the coffin of what I thought we had. "We can't do this anymore, Maria. It's too risky for both of our careers," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth I had once basked in. The professional facade we now had to maintain was a stark reminder of everything I had lost. In the end, I was left to navigate the wreckage of my own making, a ship without a compass in a sea of judgment and regret. The life I had known was gone, replaced by a reality of my own creation. The path back to myself was unclear, every step heavy with the knowledge of what could have been and the harsh truths I had learned too late. The moment I stepped into the office, I could feel it, the weight of whispered judgments, the cold shoulders that turned away as I approached. My professional reputation, once sterling, was now tarnished by rumors and whispers that seemed to echo off the walls. Maria, the one who, I'd catch snippets of conversations that would cut off as soon as I came into view. The realization that my personal choices had bled into my professional life, eroding the respect and position I had worked so hard to build, was a pill too bitter to swallow. Coming home to an empty house only amplified the loneliness. The day Tom moved out, he didn't say much. The silence between us was filled with years of memories and a chasm of betrayal. The space he left behind was palpable, a void that echoed with the remnants of our life together. Every room, every piece of furniture reminded me of what had been and what I had lost. When the divorce papers arrived, they felt like a formal acknowledgement of my downfall. Tom cited irreconcilable differences, but we both knew the truth. The legal documents didn't just signify the end of our marriage, they were a testament to the destruction my actions had wrought. The financial strain that followed was crippling. The divorce settlement heavily favored Tom, a consequence of my infidelity. I was left to navigate the murky waters of financial insecurity alone, a stark contrast to the stability we had shared. The reality of managing expenses and legal fees on a single income was a challenge I was ill-prepared for. Friends, or those I had thought were friends, sided with Tom. Their withdrawal added layers to my isolation, leaving me to face the aftermath of my choices alone. The social circle we had built together disbanded, aligning with the person they deemed the victim, while I was cast in the role of the pariah. At work, the fallout continued. I was passed over for a promotion I had been eyeing for months. The reason, though not explicitly stated, was clear. The affair had become a distraction, a mark against my professional judgment. My career, once on an upward trajectory, had hit a standstill, a reflection of the chaos my personal life had become. In the solitude of my empty home, I found myself reflecting on the choices that led me to this point. The consequences of my actions were laid bare, a harsh landscape of lost love, friendships, and professional respect. The cost of my pursuit of happiness, or what I had believed to be happiness, was higher than I could have ever imagined. And then, the final cut, Alex moved to another city for a new job, severing the last tie I had to the illusion of a future we might have shared. His departure was a quiet affair, a simple message that left no room for doubt. We were over, not just in the physical sense, but in every way that mattered. The realization that I was truly alone, forced to confront the wreckage of my own making, was a turning point. The path to rebuilding my life was uncertain, fraught with the remnants of broken relationships and a tarnished reputation. Yet, it was a path I knew I had to take. The journey toward redemption and self-forgiveness was the only way forward, a chance to start anew, not in the pursuit of happiness with another, but in finding peace within myself. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but it was mine to walk, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of my downfall. The silence in my apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the life I once led, filled with laughter, whispered secrets, and the warmth of companionship. Now, it was just me, surrounded by the ghosts of choices past, each room echoing with the loneliness that had become my constant companion. My social circle, once vibrant and inclusive, had dwindled to nothing, leaving me to face the long evenings alone. Work, too, felt like a battlefield, every achievement overshadowed by the whispers and sidelong glances of colleagues who knew too much about my personal failings. Determined to claw my way out of the hole I dug for myself, I threw myself into my job and sought solace in personal growth. Books on self-improvement and mindfulness became my new best friends, their pages offering advice on how to rebuild a life from the ashes of disaster. I started attending workshops and seminars, anything to fill the void and perhaps find a new direction for my aimless drifting. It was during one of these attempts at starting over that I ran into Tom. Our encounter was accidental, a chance meeting at a mutual friend's art exhibit. He was polite, his greeting cordial, but his eyes were distant, a clear sign that he had moved on from the storm we had weathered together. The cold politeness of his demeanor was a sharp reminder of all that had been lost. His indifference stung, a tangible sign of the emotional chasm that now lay between us. The sight of him, so composed and distant, filled me with a deep, gnawing regret. Memories of our life together played in my mind, a montage of moments both mundane and profound, now tinted with the gray hue of loss. I had hoped for a flicker of warmth, a sign that not all was lost between us, but, faced with his polite detachment, I realized the full extent of the damage my actions had caused. In the aftermath of our encounter, a resolution began to take shape within me. I accepted full responsibility for the choices that led me here, to this moment of profound isolation and regret. The journey to forgiveness, both seeking it and offering it to myself, was fraught with difficulty, but I understood that it was the only way forward. I vowed to learn from my mistakes, to grow beyond the person who had made them, and to build a future that was defined not by regret, but by the lessons learned from it. The new normal that unfolded was one of quiet reflection and slow rebuilding. My social circle may have been irrevocably changed, but I found solace in new friendships, ones that were built on the foundation of who I was becoming, not who I had been. My professional life, too, began to show signs of recovery as I proved through my actions and dedication that I was more than the sum of my past mistakes. The road ahead was not easy, marked by moments of doubt in the lingering shadows of what had been. Yet, with each step forward, I found strength in my resolve to become a better version of myself, one who faced the consequences of her actions with grace and the determination to emerge stronger. The affair and its aftermath were painful lessons in the consequences of our choices, but they were also a catalyst for change, pushing me towards a future where I could look back on this chapter not with endless regret, but with the understanding that from great mistakes come profound opportunities.